Hello, and welcome back to our series where we're going to go through all of the Psalms and dive into some of the most spiritual music ever written. So, we're going through the Psalm series because there is a ton of music out there today, and it's quite frankly just awful. I mean, almost some of it actually is evil, some of it is written by people who absolutely don't even deny and proclaim that they're following evil paths. Some of it don't realize that they are, but I mean, if you look at some of the best performing artists today on the Billboard, a lot of them definitely worship things like money, sex, crime, things like that. There is a tragic shortage of good music coming out there to be found. So I wanted to go through the Psalms and kind of study those, dive deep into those to get an understanding of what some of the most influential spiritual music ever written actually looked like, at least in the lyrics. We don't have the actual instrumentation written down. We don't know what the melodies were, but we still have the words. And I think that's kind of cool because there have been a lot of people that actually record the words and they write their own music to it. It leaves it open for interpretation. So we're going to dive through and look at each psalm. And today we are on Psalm 4. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So this one, according to some old Jewish tradition, from what I was researching, it is possibly connected to Psalm 3, though that was not confirmed. You'll kind of see when we go through that it definitely shares some similar themes to the previous psalm, so I could totally see how they got that. This one also has a title to it. It says, "To the choir master with stringed instruments, a psalm of David." So unlike the last one, this is not so much a title, is just the author's name and the direction. It's supposed to have some stringed instruments to it. It doesn't, like the last one, have a title that says, when David was free or fleeing from Absalom, his son. So the a lot of people make up their own titles to this, since it's just a Psalm of David is a very generic title, and a lot of them have that. But at least it tells us who wrote this. So let's go ahead and read through it now. Starting in verse 1, we say, "Answer me when I call, O God of my righteousness. You have given me relief when I was in distress. Be gracious to me and hear my prayer. O men, how long shall my honor be turned into shame? How long will you love vain words and seek after lies? Selah. But know that the Lord has set apart the godly for himself. The Lord hears when I call to him. Be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts on your beds and be silent. Selah. Offer right sacrifices and put your trust in the Lord. There are many who say, 'Who will show us some good?' Lift up the light of your faces upon us, O Lord. You have put more joy in my heart than they have when their grain and wine abound. In peace I will both lie down and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety." So, if this actually was a continuation of Psalm 3, this was going to be during when David fled after his son Absalom led up the rebellion against him. So I think, considering that context, we can see a little bit of this. We can kind of understand where David's heart was. It says in verse 1, "Answer me when I call, O God of my righteousness. For you have given me relief when I was in distress. Be gracious to me and hear my prayer." So his prayer is safety. His prayer is to allow him rest, sleep, and rejuvenation because he, at this time, was possibly fleeing from Absalom and his armies who were out against him. And it says tens of thousands were hunting him in the last psalm. But even then, without the historical context, still, they answer me when I call, O God of my righteousness. I don't believe that in any other psalm David actually says, God of my righteousness. So I believe that this is a callback to he is trying to be righteous. He has, he has suffered. It said in 2 Samuel, when we read the story of what's actually happening with David and Absalom, he has he's paid his dues for his transgressions against God, and his son died, his wife is rising up against him. All these things happen to punish him. So, in a sense, he has paid for what he's done. He has been punished for it. He's now righteous again, and he knows that because he's righteous again, the Lord will guard him. The Lord will guard his heart and the Lord will guard his actual body. It says, "You have given me relief when I was in distress." In the previous psalm, he talks about being able to lie down and sleep because the Lord is his shield. So that absolutely checks with that. "And be gracious to me and hear my prayer." So he's talking about the power of prayer is a very big thing in this particular psalm. And he's teaching us to pray often. And I don't know, when I was reading this, I pictured that picture from The Office where Michael Scott has written on the board, you miss all the shots that you don't take, Wayne Gretzky, from Michael Scott. But I mean, it's kind of true. If there's something on your heart, lift it up to God. If it's righteous, he will answer, but you also have to understand that sometimes the answer is not yes, sometimes the answer is no. And sometimes the answer is wait. I heard a preacher talk about this, that there's 3 answers for prayer, and I really liked it. He said we have yes, no, and keep waiting. So just because your prayer is not answered now doesn't mean it might not be down the line. And sometimes the answer is no, and you also have to be all right with that. Nobody really likes hearing no, especially when they have their heart set on something, but that's all right because, to quote the old Eagles song, you can't always get what you want. And sometimes it's just not right for the path that you have been set on. So let's go to verse 2 now. "O men, how long shall my honor be turned into shame? How long will you love vain words and seek after lies? Selah." And there's that Selah again. It's telling us there's a brief pause here. We don't know if they were shredding mad guitar solos or, I guess, technically lute solos back then, or if it was just a reflection. Maybe when they were singing this psalm, they held the note out for a while, but it just indicates there was some sort of stop when they were performing this psalm. So, "O men, how long shall my honor be turned into shame? How long will you love vain words and seek after lies?" Absalom, what he was doing at this time in order to gain power, he was going around, and when people would come to talk to David about something they needed, Absalom would lie and say, David's not here. I wish I could help you. I wish I had the power and authority. I would love to. I would be great at it. I would be the best. Unfortunately, I don't have that power. It'd be totally awesome if I did, though. Remember that I absolutely want to help you out. He was really putting that seed of rebellion in the people's heads. And through that, he was spreading the gossip around town. He was lying to them because David was in the castle. It's not like David had abandoned his people, just Absalom was the one turning them away and saying, he wished he could help. He totally would if he had the power to. So it's amazing how fast, gossip can lead to bad things. And we're called not to gossip in the Bible itself. So it 100% makes sense. Nothing good comes from gossip and seeking after lies. And then verse 3, "But know that the Lord has set apart the godly for himself. The Lord hears when I call him." And that goes back to verse 1. The sanctified, the set apart, God uses. When you are trying your best to follow that path of righteousness, God knows your heart. When you are absolutely giving it your all and trying to go at it, God will use you for his purpose. I mean, he can use anybody, but specifically, if you've proven to be a good and safe or faithful servant, then why would he not continue to use you as a good and faithful servant? And typically, good and faithful servants are going to pray a lot, and a lot of times that just talking with God and communing with God, that brings you closer, and letting him know what's on your heart is very important. The power of prayer is definitely not to be overlooked. Sometimes it helps us realize things ourselves. We sort it out in prayer and think, oh, did I really mean that? It's a really good way to actually see what's on your heart and just lay your ducks out in a row like that. All right, so we have verse 4, "Be angry and do not sin." I thought this was an interesting line. Normally we think anger is a sin, but there is a righteous anger. There's a way to be angry and not sin. Technically, the act of anger itself is not necessarily sin, but it very easily leads us to things that are sin. It leads us to, harsh words, to violent actions, things like that. We can't necessarily control if we're angry, but we can control what we do when we're angry. It's just significantly hard when we're in that state of mind. So that's why it says, be angry and do not sin. It's okay that David was angry and upset with what happened with Absalom, but he fled. He did not sin. He did not believe he actually had a chance to. He actually instructed his guards not to kill Absalom, specifically not to kill him. So he didn't sin there, even though he was angry and upset. And I think that's particularly interesting. It really shows the meekness of David because David was a very strong person once he grew up into an adult. I mean, he was strong as a kid, but when he grew up into an adult, he had David and David's mighty men, and they were just the strongest group in town, but they still didn't just go around bullying people and getting whatever they wanted. They chose meekness. They kept their strength for a righteous cause, and that's ultimately what's really important here is that it's great to be strong. You should be absolutely as hard to kill as possible, but don't go around bullying others who aren't. Don't be flexing for the vain purposes, because chances are there's a reason that you have that strength. Be angry and do not sin. And then we also see, even Jesus got angry, but he didn't sin. When he went to the temple and saw the money changers and everything inside, he flipped over the tables, he whipped some people and chased them out of the temple very angrily. But his sin or his anger was a righteous anger from God. It wasn't a sinful anger. His actions were because they were ruining God's sacred place, and therefore his actions were righteous. And that's the distinction here between anger and sin, I feel like, from this verse. In the continuation of verse 4, we have ponder in your own hearts on your beds and be silent, Selah. And I thought that was interesting. I personally, a lot of my prayer time is in bed. That's just when things are quiet. That's when they're the least hectic. I think it's the easiest time to commune the most deeply with the Lord. Um, I feel like I've gotten a lot of good suggestions in my life through prayer while I was laying on my bed. But that's also when it's easy for negative feelings to sleep or creep in, like anxiety, worry. Maybe we bring back things in our mind that we were angry about earlier and it fuels us up. And that's something we talked about in the last Psalm with Psalm 3 is the Lord lets us sleep. And I think that's especially cool when combined with this one, ponder in your own hearts on your bed and be silent, that we can just really give those things up to God in prayer. And I think a large portion of that, in prayer, we typically focus on what I want, what should I have. But a lot of prayer should also be just giving gratitude for God for the things that you do have, the things that are going right. And what's really interesting is in our brains, you cannot physically be angry and have gratitude at the same time because they use the same neural pathways in the brain. So if you are angry or anxious, you're worried, fearful, any of those things, just stopping to think about what you're actually grateful for and giving gratitude to God for those will absolutely help ease your mind. You may be feeling them so strongly that it's really hard to in the moment. Some deep breathing may be really good for you. Just trying to stop and just reflect on anything good in your life and giving thanks for that will be a great way to help ease that anxiety, that worry, and that anger. Just make sure that you're focusing on the good. And I know some days it is super hard to find anything to be thankful for. Some days, just the fact that you woke up is something to actually be thankful for because unfortunately, some people didn't wake up today. So, just a shout out to the Lord for the fact that you opened your eyes this morning or afternoon or whenever you wake up. Just the fact that you're still here and drawing breath is something to be thankful for because He didn't owe any of us our lives, but still gave it to us anyway. So just find the little things. You may have to dig deeper some days than others. Not every day's a blessing, but that's all right. There is always something. And sometimes it's just, Lord, life is wild, but thank you because I'm still here. And just focus on that. And I think you'll find that over time, it's going to help weed out that anger, that anxiety, that worry, and that fear that we experience just both through the power of prayer, but also, it's almost like we were wired this way to where gratitude is and anger take the same neural circuit in the brain through some sort of creative design in order to make that happen. I always thought that was super cool. All right, so verse 5, we're going to go ahead and continue. Offer right sacrifices and put your trust in the Lord. So I think this is kind of a New Testament versus Old Testament kind of deal. In the Old Testament, uh, for those of you who have not delved much into the Old Testament and just like to stick with the new one, in the Old Testament, there was a big list of the specific sins that people committed and the specific sacrifices you had to do in order to atone for those. That's why Jesus had to come, and ultimately, he was the sacrifice for everyone. And the altar of sacrifice moved from the Old Testament, it was a physical place, to the New Testament where it resides in our hearts. And now we can offer, and now we can actually talk to God and ask for forgiveness. And that was the whole point of Jesus coming and dying on the cross, is to get rid of the having to physically slaughter something. I don't recall any specific sin and the cost to atone for it in the Old Testament, but let's just make up for example. Say you stole something from your neighbor. Now you have to go and like slaughter a chicken or something like that in atonement to God. I mean, also give it back. Don't be stealing from your neighbor. But say I did this action. There is this thing that I have to do to pay for it. There was a very, it was just a very systematic implementation that they had for that. So I think that's why it's saying now offer right sacrifices and put your trust in the Lord. Because you have to trust in the Lord that you're also forgiven. It's hard to carry the burdens. We mess up every day. There was one person in life who was perfect, and we aren't it. If we actually sat there and carried the burdens of our sin all day, every day, it would get us down so much. We have to put our trust in God that, once we ask for forgiveness and once we ask for that kindness and redemption from Him, that He will give it to us, that we are actually forgiven for our things. So long as we're trying our best to not do it again, inevitably we'll probably fail. People have patterns for a reason, but you got to at least try, and God knows your heart. If you truly want that trust and forgiveness, then, I mean, He will grant it. So let's go ahead and continue. We got verse 6. There are many who will say, "Who will show us some good? Lift up the light of your face upon us, O Lord." And then verse 7, we're going to continue and put these all together. "You have put more joy in my heart than they have when their grain and wine abound." So I think here he's talking about there's people who search for the miracles of God that just kind of take joy in their own earthly things. People talk big and they say, oh, there's a lot of, they call them church people. They're people who are only Christians on Sunday for about an hour and a half. They want God to show them good. They want to look good, but really their delight is in earthly things. But when David says, "You have put more joy in my heart than they have when their grain and wine abound," I mean, there is more joy to be found in the joy of the Lord, the love that He has for us. I mean, some of the happiest people I've ever met were people that followed God with their whole heart and didn't have a whole lot of actual physical wealth to them. But there's a lot of people who just want to party. You got that grain house full of grain, you got your wine stocks full of wine, and it's a good time. That's joy to them. But the joy of the Lord will always outweigh any feeling that we can have on earth, because ultimately God is who actually gave us our feelings anyway. So we can go on to verse 8, the final verse. "In peace I will both lie down and sleep. For you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety." So we talked about sleep a little bit earlier, so I'm not going to delve too deeply into that one for this verse. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting. That really hinged on Psalm 3, where David was talking about him curbing his fear so he can lie down and know that the Lord is his shield. Know that the Lord will be your shield while you're asleep. Pray for his, or you can pray for his protection. You can pray for your worries to go away, and just be thankful, and that will help you sleep. It will ease your mind. It's both being able to give it up to God helps you mentally, but I think it also helps your body physically be able to rest easier. You don't get good sleep when you're having all sorts of negative feelings, and it's a terrible cycle because you wake up with no energy the next day, and without energy, it's hard to make good choices. It's easier to make bad choices. So it's this horrible infinite feedback loop, basically, that keeps us vibrating on low. So we want to definitely avoid that. And then it says, "For you, O Lord, make me dwell in safety." I just thought the dwell in safety was an interesting term. And Was it Psalm 1 or 2? I forget which one actually off the top of my head. Talked about, Lord, you are my refuge, and refuge basically meant, well, a safe dwelling. So, I mean, it's just a different way to put the same thing. It's just reiterated throughout the Bible, and, and God says God has the concept of a second, third witness. There it is. The Lord is our safety, and He is the foundation, basically, of all that we should be doing. He's at the very, very bottom, basically, of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but spiritually. All right, so yeah, I thought this was a really cool psalm. It's not usually the one that people will make a giant church song out of. It's not the one that people will quote the most, but it's still a really cool psalm. I think all of these have something, or a lot actually, interesting. If you really go through line by line and just see what they're talking about, try and find the historical context of it, and just really sit and meditate, as we're called to in Psalm 1. And I think that's why in the very first psalm, it tells us to meditate on God's word, because all of these are so rich with ideas. It's really hard to just read them and go, oh, cool, and then go on to the next one and actually get something from it. You have to sit there and think about, oh, what does this mean? And a lot of times, there wasn't really the science at the time to know about things like, neural pathways in the brain and how to outweigh that and the power of prayer, and that it actually causes physical changes in our electromagnetic field and things like that. So that's why it's so important that we go through these and we dive into some of this old spiritual music, especially because music today a lot of it is just garbage. And that's 100%, I feel like, design, because, we see in Ephesians, Paul writes that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this age, and spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. And that's unfortunately just going to be true today. I mean, the entertainment industry, the music industry, the movies that we watch, a lot of these are, I mean, there's an argument to be made. Is it purposefully trying to lead us astray, or is that just kind of where society is kind of moving away from God? So that's where the entertainment went to. It's a chicken or egg thing. What happened first? And it's impossible to actually say which one happened first, but honestly, it's not really that important, because the fact of the matter is that it happened. So we got to stay alert. We got to stay on guard and surround ourselves with good people. And ultimately, even in a failing world, all you can really do is surround yourself with good people and try and do good around you. So if you're a little black-pilled at the moment, just looking at what wild things are happening around you, I always try to tell people struggling with that, you can't fix the world. Just surround yourself with good people and try and do good in your local community. That's about the best you can do. There are some who are called to do it more, but if you just do those two things, then your local community is going to be the thing that affects your life more day to day than anything else. So I hope this has been really interesting. If you like this interpretation, let me know down in the comments below. If you disagree with it completely, or if you had a different interpretation of the psalm, let me know. I'd love to hear from y'all, and I'd love to talk about that some more. So let me know down in the comments below. And until I see you next time, stay strong out there, stay vigilant, and keep up that fight against awful music.